Hi there. I am going to give you a rundown of what the H2B program's new Department of Homeland Security rule is going to mean for employers in 2025 and going forward. Now, the caveat is if this rule for some reason is withdrawn under the Trump administration, then all of this will change. But the rule is out December 17th, 2024. This is the biggest rule change in H2B history, at least for the past 15 years. So let's just briefly, what is the rule about? The rule affects the H2 program. The H2 visa program, for those of you who don't know, allows U.S. businesses to bring in temporary workers into the U.S. for businesses that need help over shorter periods of time, for seasonal help, for help during peak load periods, for help during intermittent, high periods of business. And there are two main programs, the H2A for agricultural jobs. So when people talk about, our seasonal labor, our farmhands are all going to be deported. No, they're not. They're not going to be deported because close to 500,000 of them each year are here legally. So rest easy. And then there's the H2B for non-agricultural jobs. And so this is like landscaping, hospitality, construction, nannies, caregivers, things that we do. On the screen, H2A agriculture, H2B is non-agriculture. Okay, we're going to be talking about the rule for the H2B program. Okay, so this is a final rule to modernize the H2B program, protect workers, and improve flexibility, according to the DHS. All right, so let's look at the key changes. Okay, part one has to deal with program efficiency and simplifying the process. Two big key things here. Number one, employers can now hire workers regardless of nationality. Now, the old system required an annually updated country eligibility list. This was a bit of an albatross around the program's neck because if that list wasn't updated from year to year, then it would mean that the program couldn't function. So I have a feeling that part of the reason that there's no more country eligible list is so that the incoming administration can't just refuse to update that list and thereby kill the program. Why do I think that's a fear? It's a fear because Project 2025 outlined that very scenario. But what are the unintended consequences of getting rid of nationality restrictions in this program? It means that the entire world can participate in this program. Awesome. Africa gets to participate in this program. The whole African continent gets to participate. Most of those countries were blocked out of the program. It also means that South Asia, the most populated place on earth, gets to participate in this program. And I would say that the major player coming into the program is India. And that I think that's going to really have some potentially unintended consequences. If you're familiar with the H2B program, then you know that one of the very real problems is that Indian staffing firms have sort of monopolized that program, and they turned its lottery into one that's basically impossible to win in unless you put in multiple applications for yourself as a worker. There's a lot of appetite for coming into the US on the H2B. I could see those firms moving in as employers in the H2B program, maybe as staffing employers or something, and really warping it. There's a lot of money already in those firms. They're established. I could see this increasing H2B enrollment in the coming years. Okay, so that's the first thing that jumps out at me. So already, regardless of nationality, that prevents the program from being killed off in one way, as said in Project 2025, but maybe it's going to introduce new problems. So that's something to think about. Now, do I think it's bad that India is participating? No, I love people in general. Indian people aren't any different from people in general. But I do think that the industrialization of kind of H2B feeder firms from India that's present with an H2B program that's really warped that program. I am a little afraid of that for the H2B program, okay? All right, but anyway, no more country eligibility lists, so the whole world can participate, so that's really interesting. It certainly opens up the door for looking at, if you're looking for a nanny or caregiver that matches your cultural or ethnic background, certainly this has changed the nature of the program for you, if you are that person. Then we have this change on how the maximum stay clock is going to be reset. It's going to be a lot simpler. There's the 60-day reset rule, but I think that's not so important because it gets into minutia, and we can skip over that, but you can look at that part yourself. But I want to move to part 2, where there is something really important, which is this rule also strengthens worker protections. Specifically, it's going to increase, it's going to strengthen, it's going to make worse, if you will, the consequences for charging prohibited fees or violating labor laws. So petitions can now be denied or revoked now and in the future if these laws are violated. Frankly, I think that's long overdue. The H2 program, like other programs, has its particular problems, and I think underpaying H2 workers and the American workers that work alongside of them is a big problem, and this can go a ways towards helping curb that, because these could be really high fees. We don't have the specific numbers yet, but they look like they're going to be very serious. So when we do have a number, I will update it. And then the other thing is that H2 workers will now get whistleblower protection. So H1B whistleblower protections are big. They come with fees that attorneys can earn for prosecuting these cases. That becomes the case for H2 workers, which it looks like it will with this rule. Then I think that's going to have a real effect on bad employers who mistreat H2 workers, in which they're going to have to really be careful with how they treat their workers, where they have them work, how they pay them. I mean, they should be careful anyway, don't get me wrong. But if they don't, then the H2B workers will suddenly have a way to hold those employers accountable. That's a big thing. So just a side note, you should fully cooperate with any DHS site inspections, any DOL site inspections, because now it comes with the potential price of whistleblower suits. It comes with the potential price of now and future revocations. It's just going to be it's going to be harder. Okay, if this rule doles out what it promises. The third part of this, and this is really my favorite part, is enhanced worker flexibility. Here's where the rule really benefits new workers. It gives them new grace periods, and it gives them new grace periods to make sure that they have the flexibility to switch employers and the flexibility to find new employers once their H2B status is up. This really makes it possible, I think, on the employee side, the H2B employee side, to truly maximize a 3-year period of H2Bs. What happens under the current rules is, let's say you get an employer for 9 months, okay? Which is the typical grant for seasonal employer certification. Well, then the job is over, and now you've got 10 days, if you're lucky, if your employer remembered to put that in on your visa, to find a new job and transfer employers. And you got, oftentimes to do that, you would have to move across the country. Well, now you have 60 days to do that. So it makes it more likely that you'll be able to stay in the US for the full 3-year grant of your H2B visa. For employers, this is great, because I think what's going to do, it's going to very quickly increase the pool of eligible workers in country that you can pull from for your H2B visas, and potentially get workers outside the lottery. I mean, if that happened, that would be fantastic. I think we could see a cumulative effect in as little as 2 years of the number of available H2B workers who are legally here within the US that can be gotten outside the lottery. That sneakily, now that I'm thinking about it, again, this rule dropped today, so I'm just thinking through it, that could be actually the most significant part of this change, that 60-day period, because it would allow the H2B workforce to stay within the US legally. So just something to think about. Okay, there's the 30-day grace period after a petition is revoked for that was given to H2B workers is now extended to 60 days. Again, that's a really good thing for H2B workers. Again, it would suck to get your H2B petition revoked. And then this is the other big thing. Workers are considered now to maintain their H2 status, no matter what. 10 days before, if they're in the country 10 days before their petition begins. So for 10 days before your petition date begins, an H2 worker is now legally in the country, which means that we can start recruiting workers and bringing them in earlier so they can really get there on their start dates. That's fantastic for that reason alone. And then 30 days after it expires. So I'm not sure how the 30-day and 60-day post-expiration provision work together, when it's 30 days, when it's 60 days when I'm looking at this. It might be 60 days if it ends early. It might be 30 days if it expires naturally, but either way, it seems like these H2 workers have plenty of time to find a new employer within the United States, or even do some sightseeing and spend some of that hard-earned money as tourists here in the US, which nobody would mind, I'm sure. But the other thing is, workers transitioning between employers can now formally and forever, it seems like, if this regulation holds, begin working for a new employer once that employer files a new extension petition. Now, this porting provision has been renewed automatically since COVID. It looks like that it's now finally something that's in the law for good. And that's ultimately a great thing for both employer and employee. Okay, what is the upshot? The upshot is that we are, if I'm thinking about this, is that DHS says upshot is efficiency is improved, but efficiency is a euphemism. It doesn't, or a word that doesn't mean anything. I think the upshot is we have, there's a greater likelihood that the H2B workforce that comes into the country gets to stay here for the full 3 years, which means that employers will have more workers to pick from. I think the other upshot of this is that workers will have a greater chance to find different types of work in the U.S. And benefit different types of businesses. I think that there will be, it'll be easier to get workers into the country for their start dates if they're coming from out of the country, because they'll be able to come in 10 days before their petition begins. So that's a really good thing. The negative sides, I could see negative sides from this, right? Negative side is, yeah, awesome, we're letting in all countries, that's really great. But the discussion I had about, India in particular, maybe this kind of the practices from H2B moving into H2B, I have real concerns about that. And again, no offense to my Indian friends, it's just what we've seen in the H2B program. And maybe that's something that we'll have to think about if it actually happens. The other potential downside is that this change could be implemented. It's supposed to be implemented January 17, 2025. I wouldn't be surprised if it's immediately challenged or by the Trump administration. So it could just add unnecessary royal to employers' employees, because it would be something that would just be like a part-time thing. So the way the regulations work, once they're finalized, it is hard to get rid of them. But if anything, the first Trump administration was creative in trying to figure out how to curtail programs that were otherwise regulatorily enacted through the proper channels. I think this program is something that is going to change fundamentally the H2B is going to change the H2B program in some fundamental ways. It'll equally apply to H2A program, but it's going to hopefully bring greater flexibility to employers and employees and bring some much needed protections to H2B and H2A employees. I hope that's helpful. You can just bookmark this if you ever need to talk about the program. Hopefully, per the usual, I'll be putting up a summary of this video as a blog post on frontierlabor.com on our blog, and you can check it out there. All right, and we'll try to link to it here in the description. Thanks so much for watching.